The old Harrowfield Asylum stood at the edge of town like a decaying memory. For decades, it had been abandoned, its windows shattered, the roof sagging with time, and the iron gates rusted shut. Local legends whispered of restless spirits that roamed its halls, echoes of the tormented souls who had perished within its walls. No one dared go near the asylum, not after what happened to those who tried. The stories were chilling: disappearing locals, unnatural cold spots, and whispers in the wine that carried the names of the living. But Sam Thatcher didn't believe in ghost stories. When Sam heard about the asylum from his friends, he laughed it off as local superstition. A skeptic by nature, he decided to investigate it for himself. Armed with a flashlight, his phone for recording, and a heavy dose of cynicism, he climbed over the rusted gates one cold October night. As he stepped through the entrance of the asylum, the temperature dropped drastically. His breath came out in icy clouds, and the silence that greeted him was thick and heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. The hallways were labyrinthine, peeling wallpaper curling like dead skin, and long-forgotten medical equipment scattered across the floor. Each step echoed, the sound seemingly absorbed by the walls. Sam brushed it off as nerves. Nothing to be scared of, he muttered under his breath. Just an old building. But as he ventured deeper, something shifted. It was subtle at first, shadows that seemed to move just outside his field of vision, the distant sound of footsteps that weren't his own. Every time he turned his head, nothing was there, just the stillness of the empty halls. He made his way to the heart of the asylum, to what was once the main treatment room. Inside, the air was colder than anywhere else in the building, and it felt thick, as if it had weight. Sam could feel it pressing down on him, squeezing his chest. Suddenly, a low hum filled the room, barely audible but unmistakable. It wasn't coming from any particular direction, it was everywhere. He pulled out his phone, recording the sound, his hands trembling slightly. The hum grew louder, shifting into faint voices, whispers threading through the air. Asterisk, help me. Let me out. Asterisk, the voices overlapped, pleading, accusing, a cacophony of forgotten souls. Sam's heart pounded in his chest, and despite himself, fear clawed its way into his mind. Then, the room plunged into darkness. His flashlight flickered out, and in the pitch black, the whispers grew louder. Sam spun around, trying to locate the source, but the voices were everywhere, closing in on him. Suddenly, the darkness shifted. Something was there, an outline in the shadows, vaguely human but twisted, its form distorting as if it were struggling to hold itself together. Sam's breath hitched as he backed up, the light on his phone barely illuminating the figure. It hovered just out of reach, its face shrouded in shadow, but he could feel its eyes on him, cold, piercing, filled with despair and anger. Asterisk, leave. Leave now? Asterisk, the voice hissed, though its mouth didn't move. Sam stumbled back, his phone shaking in his hand, as he tried to film the apparition. He turned to run, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping him inside. He banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers surrounded him again, this time louder, more frantic. Suddenly, everything went quiet. The room grew still, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. For a moment, Sam thought it was over, but then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something written on the wall. It hadn't been there before. Asterisk, he watches, he waits, and you will join us soon. Asterisk, panicked. Sam tried the door again, and this time, it creaked open. He bolted out of the room, down the hallway, and out of the asylum, never looking back. The moment he stepped outside, the temperature returned to normal, and the whispers faded into the night. But the haunting didn't end there. Days passed, and Sam tried to shake off the experience as a trick of the mind, the product of an overactive imagination. But every night, without fail, the whispers returned. They invaded his dreams, filled his room, and clung to the air around him. He heard them in the wind, in the rustling of leaves, in the hum of electricity. Then, on the seventh night after his visit, Sam awoke to find something scratched into the wall of his bedroom, written in the same jagged script he had seen at the asylum. Asterisk, he watches, he waits, and you will join us soon. Asterisk, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, and as he lay in bed, Paralyzed with fear, he felt the presence. Something was in the room with him, standing in the corner, watching. He could feel its cold gaze on him, waiting, biding its time. And Sam knew that it wouldn't be long before he would vanish just like the others who had dared to enter Harrowfield Asylum. The whispers would never let him go. But what was it that watched from the shadows? And how many others had fallen prey to its gaze, lost forever to the dark corridors of the forgotten asylum? No one knew for sure, but soon they would find out. Sam was never the same after that night. The whispers followed him everywhere he went at work, in the street, even in broad daylight. He felt watched, constantly, as if the very shadows of the world had eyes. His friends noticed his growing paranoia, the bags under his eyes, the jumpiness that turned every small noise into a source of terror. Just let it go, they would say. It was a creepy old building, that's all. But Sam knew better. He could still hear them, those voices. They were growing louder now, more distinct. Sometimes he swore he could make out individual words. One night, he heard them distinctly say his name. Other times, they hissed in his ear as he passed darkened corners, or in the dead of night, just as he was about to fall asleep. And then there were the sightings. It began subtly, a flash of movement in the corner of his eye, a figure standing at the edge of his vision, vanishing as soon as he turned his head. Each time, the figure grew clearer, a gaunt, twisted shape, its face obscured by shadows, just like the thing he'd seen in the asylum. It never got closer, but it never went away. It watched, it waited. Desperate, Sam sought out anyone who could help. He contacted paranormal investigators, mediums, even priests, but nothing worked. The whispers continued, growing louder each day. He barely slept, the fear gnawing at him constantly. He felt as though he was unraveling, piece by piece. Then, one night, something changed. It started with a dream, though Sam wasn't sure if he was really dreaming. In the dream, he stood once again in the halls of Harrowfield Asylum. The air was thick and heavy, as before, and the whispers were louder than ever. They swirled around him, echoing off the decaying walls. But this time, the shadows didn't linger at the edges of his vision. They gathered in the center of the room, coalescing into a form. It was the same twisted figure, but now its face became clearer. The shadows parted just enough for Sam to see two hollow eyes, black as the void, staring at him. Its mouth stretched into a grotesque smile, and then it spoke, its voice a low, gravelly rasp. Asterisk, you opened the door. Asterisk, Sam woke with a start, drenched in cold sweat. His heart pounded in his chest, and the whispers echoed in his ears. But as he sat up, trying to calm himself, he noticed something on the wall, scratched into the plaster, just like before. Asterisk, he watches. He waits. You cannot run. Asterisk, Sam's hands trembled as he touched the message. The scratches were fresh, the edges raw and jagged. And then, from the corner of his room, he heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, dragging across the floor. He turned, heart racing, and there it was, the figure from his dream. It stood in the shadows, watching him, its hollow eyes fixated on him. And this time, it moved. It took one step forward, then another. Sam froze. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body refused to obey. The air in the room grew colder, the shadows thickening, as if the very fabric of the room was being consumed by darkness. The figure took another step, its twisted body jerking unnaturally, its smile widening. Asterisk, you cannot run. Asterisk, it whispered again, its voice now echoing in Sam's mind, filling every corner of his consciousness. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. The room was silent once more, but Sam knew this wasn't over. The whispers had grown louder than ever. The thing that had haunted him from the shadows was no longer content to wait. It was coming for him. Sam knew that he had to do something. He couldn't go on like this, living in constant fear, waiting for the inevitable. But where could he turn? No one believed him, and those who had tried to help were powerless against whatever this thing was. There was only one place left to go, one place where he might find answers if he was brave enough to return. Harrowfield Asylum. The thought filled him with dread, but he had no choice. The asylum had taken something from him that night, something he couldn't understand. He needed to go back. He needed to find out what was watching him and why it hadn't claimed him yet. Sam prepared himself as best as he could. Armed with every tool he could think of, a crucifix, sage, salt, and a heavy flashlight, he made his way back to the asylum. The air was colder than before, the night unusually still. The moon hung low, casting long shadows over the decaying building. As he crossed the threshold, he could feel it again, that oppressive weight, the sensation that the very air was watching him. The whispers began almost immediately, circling him like vultures. But this time, Sam didn't run. He pressed forward, his heart racing, as he retraced his steps to the central treatment room. The room was exactly as he remembered it, frozen in time, though something had changed. In the center of the floor, scratched into the dust-covered tiles, was a circle of perfect, jagged ring etched into the ground. The air within the circle shimmered, distorting like a mirage, and Sam knew instinctively that this was where it all began. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside the circle. The room shifted, the walls around him seemed to bend and twist, the shadows stretching unnaturally long. The whispers grew deafening, and the air thickened with an almost palpable malevolence. And then, from the darkness, the figure appeared once more. This time, it was no longer content to linger at the edges. It stood before him, its hollow eyes staring into his soul. Asterisk, you opened the door. Asterisk, it rasped. Asterisk, now it cannot be closed. Asterisk, before Sam could react, the floor beneath him gave way, and he was falling into darkness, into a void that swallowed him whole. The whispers grew louder, turning into screams, and the last thing Sam saw before everything went black was the figure's twisted grin, wide and hungry. Then, silence. Sam was never seen again. His disappearance was just another mystery added to the long list of those who had vanished after entering Harrowfield Asylum. But those who lived in the town began to notice something strange. Late at night, when the wind was still, whispers could be heard coming from the direction of the asylum. They grew louder with each passing night, circling the town, calling out to anyone who dared to listen. And those who did, those brave or foolish enough to heed the whispers, began to dream of a twisted figure with hollow eyes, waiting for them in the darkness, its voice echoing in their minds. Asterisk, you opened the door. Now you must join us. Asterisk, the whispers were spreading, reaching out beyond the asylum, drawing more and more people into its grasp. Something was coming, something ancient and malevolent, something that had been watching from the shadows for far too long. And soon, it would be free. Years passed since Sam Thatcher's disappearance, and Harrowfield Asylum stood even more decrepit, an ominous relic sinking deeper into the shadows of time. The town had changed, new buildings sprung up, new families moved in, but the whispers never ceased. People talked of them like a local curse, something to be feared yet never fully understood. Some believed that Sam's fate was sealed within the asylum, that he had become one of the many souls trapped there, his voice just another among the chorus of the lost. Others claimed to have seen him, or something resembling him, figures walking the outskirts of town at night, their faces blank and hollow, their eyes wide with terror. But no one dared to go back to the asylum to find out. No one but Hannah Thatcher, Sam's younger sister. Hannah had been only a child when her brother disappeared. She had grown up with the stories, the fear, and the whispers that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. But as she got older, the fear transformed into something else, an obsession. She couldn't let it go. The questions gnawed at her. Where had Sam gone? What had he seen? And why had it all started with that cursed place? On the 10th anniversary of Sam's disappearance, Hannah decided to go where no one else would. She would return to Harrowfield Asylum and find the truth, no matter the cost. Armed with her brother's old journal, the crucifix he had carried, and a deep resolve, Hannah made her way to the asylum in the dead of night. The building loomed before her like a living entity, its broken windows watching her approach. The gates groaned as she pushed them open, and as soon as she crossed the threshold, she felt it, the heavy, oppressive atmosphere her brother had described in his journal. The whispers began almost immediately, soft at first but growing louder with each step. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the treatment room, where Sam had last faced the thing that had haunted him. The air grew colder the closer she got, and the shadows seemed to move around her, but Hannah pressed on. When she reached the room, she found it exactly as her brother had described it. The circle etched into the floor was still there, and the air above it shimmered faintly, as though something was stirring just beneath the surface. Without a second thought, Hannah stepped into the circle. The room around her shifted, bending and twisting as though reality itself was warping. The whispers grew deafening, swirling around her, and then silence. Hannah blinked, and she was no longer in the asylum. She stood in a vast, endless void, where the air felt thick with malice. Shadows moved in the distance, their forms indistinct and writhing. And then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. It was Sam, or at least, it looked like him. His face was pale, his eyes hollow and empty, and his movements were slow, deliberate, as though he were struggling to maintain his shape. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Hannah, you shouldn't have come." Tears filled her eyes as she reached out to him. "Sam, what happened to you? What is this place?" But Sam didn't answer. His form flickered, his face contorting in pain. Behind him, the shadows began to shift, taking on the shape of something larger, something more monstrous. It was the same twisted figure that had haunted Sam's dreams, the same presence that had followed him until the end. "Hannah, it's not what you think." Sam's voice was faint, strained. "There are things that should never be disturbed." The shadows grew closer, surrounding them both. The figure towered over them now, its hollow eyes fixed on Hannah, its mouth stretching into that same grotesque smile. "You opened the door," it whispered, its voice a mix of Sam's and something far older, far darker. "Now, you must face what lies beyond." The ground beneath Hannah began to crumble, and the darkness closed in. She felt herself being pulled deeper into the void, deeper into the unknown. Sam's form flickered and faded, and his voice, strained and distant, echoed through the emptiness. "Run, while you still can." But there was no escape. The shadows consumed everything, and the whispers became screams, filling her mind, her very soul. The last thing she saw before everything was swallowed by darkness was the twisted smile of the figure, its eyes gleaming with malice. And then, nothing. No one ever heard from Hannah Thatcher again. Like her brother, she simply vanished, her fate sealed within the walls of Harrowfield Asylum. The town continued to change, to grow, but the whispers persisted. Some said they could hear Hannah's voice now, mingled with the others, calling out to anyone who would listen. Others claimed to have seen her walking the edges of town at night, her eyes hollow, her face blank. But the truth of what happened to Sam and Hannah Thatcher remains a mystery, lost to the shadows of the asylum and whatever dark entity still resides there. And though the whispers continue, no one knows what they truly mean. Are they warnings, or are they lures, beckoning more souls into the void? The answer remains unknown. For now,